feature.
Tickle.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to Botched Roll, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net. I am your Dungeon Master, storyteller, guy behind the Game Master screen. I am Mike the Birdman, and this is the show here on Twig that we have dedicated towards the tabletop role-playing game hobby. I could be interviewing people from the industry, I could be talking about funny stories, I could be talking about theory, I could be talking about a specific book. Who knows? As I mentioned on the last episode, at least until I launch, this will be like a really, really quick plug. I am going to be launching my own Dungeon Master for Hire service / Patreon coming up by Free RPG Day, which is June 22nd, 2024. I will have details on my social media and here on the website. I'm sure Alex will pop a link somewhere. And you can find out more information if you and your friends want to join me and hire me to run you through the Forgotten Realms across the Alpha Quadrant, or perhaps across the lands of Cybertron and beyond. I'm your guy. So, last time on the show, I talked about the benefits of convention gaming and trying something new and different. Kind of like going to the buffet and trying something like, hey, that looks weird and fucked up. Let's try that. And I kind of want to expand upon that into a different realm when it comes to actually sitting down at the table. And what I mean by that is, so I've been playing tabletop RPGs I started back in 1992, and I started with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And the first character I was forced to play. I'm not saying someone held a gun to my head, but my first game master was a guy named Jamie, and we played D&D, and I rolled up a cleric. Didn't want to play a cleric. Didn't want to. I wanted to be kick-ass friggin' Conan. I wanted to be the guy with the two-handed greatsword, or like Aragon from like fucking Lord of the Rings. I wanted to be Billy Badass. I wanted to be something cool. But instead, I had to do this. A cleric. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, hey, here's your role. Here, you can turn undead. Yay. And since that time, I haven't ventured much outside of a certain realm. Like, I always wanted to be like, all right, fine, I'm going to be a fighter. Fine, I'm going to be a barbarian. But things changed for me probably about... Wow, when I really think about it, I guess it would have been about 10 years ago. I had a friend of mine. I was living in a different city at this time, and I was playing Pathfinder First Edition. Pathfinder was sort of like, what if D&D 3.5 worked? I like to nickname it D&D 3.75. And it was the first time I'd ever played a utility character, a support character. I was a sorcerer, and I was a skill monkey. I had spells that didn't do a lot of damage, but they could really change the loadout of the battlefield. I could do buffs. I could do debuffs. I could screw with the enemy, screw with my DM in really creative ways, but I wasn't going to run up and deal like 2d12 damage to something in its face. What I could do, however, is I could knock it out. I could make it my friend. I could make it so it couldn't grab its weapon. I could blind it. I could put conditions on it. So I used to listen to a friend of mine's podcast, and they talked about the tabletop role-playing game hobby. And the biggest piece of advice I ever got from that, and it's something that I very much carry through into my own modern, procedure, how I play, is be more than a collection of stats. Be more than a stat block. And what I mean by that is it's not just setting yourself up from role-playing identity, although I will talk about that in probably a future episode. It's be willing to try something different. So playing a spellcaster, playing a sorcerer meant I had to learn how to approach the game differently. And I wasn't just running up and dealing damage. It was like, I have to think tactical. I have to think smart. I have to think I'm not just going to get by on a boatload of hit points and that's going to be it, right? I have to really think about this if I want this character to survive, if I really want to experience their story. Now, that character actually became part of a Kickstarter campaign. She was in Freeport, which is a book which was set in Pathfinder, but you can also port it to D&D, I think. It was called I know it's called Freeport, the City of Pirates or something. And I was a water witch, which was really cool. They kind of fleshed it out, and even the ship they gave me was called the Wily Depths. It was named after my best friend, my cat who since passed away, Dr. Wily, which was kind of cool. But anyway, point what I'm trying to get across here is playing that spellcaster kind of changed how I started to approach different games. And I really wanted to not be the damage guy. I wanted to be the rogue. I wanted to be the warlock. And I've been playing in a long-running D&D campaign for the last year or so. Actually, a year almost to the day as of this episode recording. And in the one game, I played a rogue with the intention of being... I want to be sneaky. I want to do things. But I started taking levels in Monk because at the time I was watching a lot of Dragon Ball Z. So I'm like, okay, I want to be able to put out some damage. But then I started playing in a different game, and I started not metagaming, but I started fleshing out the world because they were interconnected in a sense. So I was allowed to play in two backyards at once. So what I did is I started creating a background where that character, one of them was a damage machine, but I multi-classed to give them levels into something. So what I did was I took one of the characters was a monk / druid who couldn't wild shape yet, but the other one was a rogue who was like a bounty hunter and started taking levels in monk because she was falling in love with another character. And that gave me a reason to try something new. And I was like, okay, this is not the most optimal build. Like, I think I'm a rogue soul knife, and I think I'm a monk way of the shadow, but even that's changing for me drastically, and I can't say too much more because some of my friends might be listening, but it's leading me down a very unique path that I never considered before, and that's from playing, for example, Baldur's Gate 3, which is a wonderful computer game. If you love D&D, you got to play this thing. And it really got me thinking about different types of characters and different things that I want to accomplish from a role-playing perspective, but also from a enrichment of the environment perspective. Like, I'm able to interact in a different way. And it led me to my current game, which I'm currently playing with a bunch of friends whose lineup has recently changed, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in a future episode, probably the one after this, where I talk about how do you deal with problem players. But it became where I wanted to play a druid because I just think they're cool and it very much aligns with my indigenous identity. But I wanted to play a bard because I like that idea of being social. I like the idea of diplomacy. I like the idea of being able to talk my way out of a situation. I love role-playing. I don't like dungeon crawls, right? Most people play D&D because they want to be, oh my god, I'm going to kick this thing's ass with like fireball, 3d8 damage, or whatever the piss it is. No, I'd much rather charm said person, be like, hey, I'm your buddy, I'm your friend, I'm your pal. Me and my friends got to get in here, so why don't you let me in? Here's 50 gold. You let us through. And the next time you need help, I will be right there to help you. I love that thing. I love being more than just, I cast a spell, I kick its ass, roll sneak attack damage, cool, attack of opportunity. Like, I don't like that. And that's why I have other people in the group who fill that role. And I found myself getting a much more enriched role-playing experience because I was trying stuff like that. And even when I was playing the damage-dealing characters, I wanted to make sure there was a reason why they were badass or why they I wanted to be flawed. I wanted to be different. Like my one character in the other game was a monk slash druid, Janessa, and her thing was she was part of an order I created called the Cloakwood Monks, and their big deal is they have, when they gain their ability to use ki, they have to come back to the temple within 1 year and explain to the Grand Master, how did you find your focus? Where do you draw your spiritual energy from? And then they get their name. Like her name was Janessa Fox Dancer. And I have a very complicated backstory, and maybe I can talk about creating interesting backstories later. But the idea was, when I made Janessa, I wanted her to be this kick-ass Goku kind of stand-in, but I wanted her to have a role-playing reason as to why she had other abilities. And it was something I'd never played before. Like, I'd never played a monk before. My other character of Sarah, who is a rogue. I've never played a rogue before. I've never played a monk. Again, it all started with me watching Dragon Ball. And I was really worried for a long time. Like, am I becoming that damage-dealing moron? No. I wanted to enrich that because I wanted to try something different. And the more I look at the character classes, and I'm focusing a lot on D&D here, but I'll kind of spread that out in just a minute to other game worlds. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to see how the other shoe fit. And I've discovered that when I look at my own personal philosophy, I really align with a lot of stuff that the monk does, that idea of inner peace, being driven by a higher purpose. Maybe I'm full of myself. I don't know. But I look at the druid and the connection to nature and how my own spiritual beliefs kind of influence that. And I'm realizing I can really bring a lot of that to the table to enrich the role-playing experience. But it's something different that I've never done before. Like I said, it used to be fighters and barbarians and all this stuff. And it's really evolved over the last easily couple of years to being more than, here's a stat block, here's the optimal build. I very rarely look up build guides. Sometimes I might, for like, if I do want to deal damage, at least I'm going to be cool and it's going to make sense as to why I have these feats or this ability array or whatever. I want it to make sense. I don't want to fall in the trap of being a power gamer. And I think that's a lot of my issue, and I kind of wonder if this kind of sucks. But I look at people who power game and I'm thinking, I don't like that. But I realize that's a very valid way to play too. If that's your fantasy, if this is how you enjoy going across the worlds of whatever, cool. All the power to you. But that's not me, and I don't have to play like that. And I guess it's finding your own niche within the group, because, you know, if you're a talky character and you're constantly running into the Tomb of Annihilation, you're not talking your way out of that. Maybe you're gonna have to have a talk with your kind of storyteller and like, okay, what can I do differently here? And most problems can be solved by that. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with talking with your DM or talking with your players around you. Say, hey guys, can we do XYZ? And that's cool. I mean, honestly, the group that I'm playing with now, there's a lot of interesting overlap because we're playing in a very paramilitary focused campaign where we have a mission, we have an objective, and we have to think like military, not like adventurers. And that actually led to a lot of group tension early on in our game. And now things have changed and that dynamic's a little bit different now, but it really brought out some really good role playing, and it really changed the direction of the story because it forced people to think differently. And it was interesting in how some of it resolved, some of it didn't go the way that we all wanted to, but ultimately in the end, I think it turned out okay in a lot of good ways, and whatever happens next, I guess. But the biggest lesson I learned from that was, if you're willing to try something different, sometimes you might get something absolutely wonderful. Sometimes you might also get mixing ice cream and hot sauce. Not exactly a great combination. Sounds interesting, but probably not fun. So there are things that you can do. And I guess the biggest piece of advice that I encourage people to do, and it's not just limited to fantasy, but it's try things in like Shadowrun or stuff like Star Trek. You don't always have to be Captain Picard. You don't always have to be, the street samurai. Don't think more than damage. Think what will give you the best role-playing experience while working with your storyteller. Like, I know in some of the Shadowrun games I've played in before, my game master at the time, when I really look back on how he adapted, he really did a really fantastic job. Like, my character was a street samurai, and he found a way to work in a way to give me magic in a very cool and unexpected way. Long story short, he turned me into an ant shaman, and I didn't see it coming. And it was just one of the most magical times in my life as a role player, because I really felt fulfilled for that. I'm like, wow, you didn't have to go this hard, and you did. And it was just such a fun time for me to try out. So it was something like, I'm primarily a damage dealing class, but now you're changing me into something else. I can work with this. Like, I can really craft some magic here. And I was totally blown away by that, because they wanted to give me something different and exciting. And I really did kind of get that, which again, super, super surprising that I was turned from this death dealing machine with an MP laser, and now I'm throwing spells like Stink Cloud, and I'm doing all this really, really, really cool shit. And it's something that I didn't necessarily expect to have happen from the hop. And again, wonderful experience. And I would advise you, when you're trying something different, talk to your storytellers, talk to your groups, see what do you need. I mean, a friend of mine gave me some great advice years ago. It's like, be careful if you ever drive vehicles. Like, if you're the bus driver, so to speak. Like, if you play, I don't know, like a game like Cyberpunk Red or Shadowrun, and you become a rigger, right? Like, are you going to be the guy driving the car or the truck? But you have options. You have drones. Or if you're a decker or a net runner, and that's about the only I'm sure there's like other games that probably have this problem too. You almost run a different game now because you have to worry about cyberspace and how turns are. I mean, it may be different than Cyberpunk Red. I've never played a net runner. The only characters I've even designed remotely are a solo and a media, because damage dealer, talkie character. Maybe I'd create a rocker. I don't know. But everybody wants to play Johnny Silverhand. I'm more interested in being Walter Cronkite or the Terminator. But yeah, I mean, again, we're working with your group. Everybody can take different roles. Like, one thing I've thought about, really, really thought about, is if I want to learn world lore, there's maybe a way for you to play something different and maybe encourage something new and different from you. And that might be play a character class that really relies on world building. And what I mean by that is, if your table's into this thing, I think you could actually have a really freaking huge amount of fun with this. If you played a cleric or a paladin, you don't have to be, thy pious prick. But you could really lean into, like, for example, in D&D, I'm a paladin or cleric of Tyr. I represent the god of justice. What does that mean to you, right? And that's a healing class and a support class, but you can also do some pretty cool damage. Or as a paladin, you can do ass kicking and cool spell casting. And again, you can do a lot of things, but you've tried something different. You're not just a fighter with a sword or a barbarian. Or, a character like a druid has so many options, again, just from a role-playing perspective. You've got combat wild shape, but you could be like a spore druid and putting all sorts of crazy shit around you. Or there are different flavors of barbarian now that can not quite do like druid type stuff, but there's like a beast totem where you can like be like the beast master, or maybe you want to play like a ranger or something like that. Again, I think if you're willing to look beyond damage and what you can do to a battlefield, explore what other options. And in my opinion, you're able to read what your group is pretty easy. Like, if you're a dungeon crawl, well, I don't know what to tell you. Hopefully you get a more enriching experience other than go kick Lord douchebag's ass each and every week or go kill these goblins. I hope you're getting into political intrigue. I hope you're finding out why this evil god is cursing the land's fertility rates, or why there's a crashed Decepticon ship in the middle of Russia or something like that. I really hope you're getting a chance to explore what the game can be, to really dig into the meat and potatoes of it than just simple, hey, go fight so-and-so. Because, again, experiences like that can be absolutely role-playing game life-changing. Like I said, the experiences I've had playing as a rogue and a druid and a monk, but especially right now, the druid and the bard, I've had so much fun. And I'm not dealing the most damage on the field. And even right now, I tried to do something damage dealing and I fucked somebody because I didn't read the spell description. I used the spell Ice Knife, and the player I was playing was like, don't do that again. I'm like, what are you talking about? I do 1d10 ice damage, blah, blah, blah. He's like, don't you say blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, oh, okay. I read it, I'm thinking, shit. And I never thought about it. Basically, I covered them in ice damage because I wasn't reading. And that's partially on me. I own that. But I tried something new and different, and I had a mistake, but it was a learning experience, which led to a really great role-playing moment later. And again, I really had a good time with something like that, just learning something new and exciting. Like, I know for Star Trek, for example, I've always wanted to play a ship's counselor. When I used to play by email, if you can remember that, or play by post once upon a time, I tried that. And I honestly had an amazing time. I played a ship's counselor who was assimilated by the Borg way back when, and it was honestly kind of kick-ass. And like I said, I had such a good time because I wasn't the security officer. I wasn't Tuvok. I wasn't Worf. It was neat. It was really, really, really cool. And I had a really emotional moment. Now, I kind of wish that game went a different direction because it ended not too abruptly, or ended pretty abruptly after the one really great scene. But it was fun. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, we all play these games to try out something different, to try something fun. But I'm encouraging you to think beyond Smash. I'm encouraging you to think beyond what's the most optimal build? What is the most exciting thing that I can do with this character? What do I want to get out of it? And what can you and your game master create together? Because like I said, by trying something new, maybe by introducing a paladin to your group, you introduce an entirely new subplot. Maybe by introducing a cleric, it's not just looting dead bodies. You're like, hey, you're kind of defiling the dead here, guys. I'm not entirely cool with this. I mean, obviously you don't want to get too deep into the muck there with stuff like that, but it could create maybe for some funny moments. Who knows, right? Or maybe if you play as the rigger, it'd be kind of funny if you got like a parking ticket or something like that, right? Like, there's tons of opportunity for you to do really, really interesting things if you're willing to look beyond what damage something does. And my personal philosophy to role-playing now is, especially more than anything else, is to be more than a stat block. Be more than just the optimal build. Be more than just the coolness something seems like on the surface. And I mean, of course you should play to have fun. Like I said, I'm not a power gamer. I'm not. And the few times I've done it, it felt kind of icky. But the times I've really taken the time to craft something unique and new, to learn something about the game, to learn something about myself, I've had a really amazing time. And my character of Fox Singer, the druid who is searching for his lost love but wants to bring back knowledge to the Grove, his sacred grove to his skulk is important, because he needs those levels in Bard to be that voice of the people, the voice of reason, but he also has to be that druid connected to the world, or Janessa, this impetuous youth who's trying to figure out why her sister left her behind. But she also has this need to connect with nature because it calls her, because that is her namesake. Or my other character of Sarah, she fell in love by training with someone who was a monk. What does that mean when that love is eventually betrayed, right? Like, does she turn into like Oroko Saki versus Hamato Yoshi from, the Ninja Turtles, where they become rivals, right? Like, there's so many cool things, because I wanted to try something different. It wasn't just like, I have a sword and I'm going to kick your fucking ass. It was cool, right? Like, be more than that street samurai, be more than that solo, be more than that security officer, be more than just whatever's on the sheet. Think beyond that. And like I said, if you've got a really good group and a really talented storyteller, you can have some amazing stuff. And like I said, this doesn't always apply for like one shots, or if you're running through the Tomb of Annihilation, or, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, or whatever. Your mileage may vary, but this is just my own personal philosophy to it. And yeah, just go out there and find cool stuff. I mean, hell, game masters like me, we love it when you bring cool stuff. I mean, I'm not saying break the friggin' table, because you don't get to use homebrew item that does XYZ, but if you bring me an interesting background, I'm more likely to do something cool for you because you tried something different. Or if you tried a different kind of character class I know you've never played before. Like if you're used to playing paladins and you randomly bring me a wizard. Okay, that's kind of neat. Or if you play a solo and now you're going to bring me a nomad. What does that mean, right? Like, again, I value experimentation. Like, experimentation is how we find out cool stuff about ourselves and the world around us. So I guess that would be my role-playing kind of shtick here, is experimentation is the spice of life, and I really hope you take advantage of seeing that. So whether I'm seeing you across the dunes of Arrakis, or whether we're gonna go, march across the Imperium or fight Cobra or whatever, I hope you'll try something new and cool, and I really hope you find something neat out of some of all these wonderful books, and I hope you really have a cool experience with your storytellers and your friends as time goes on. So anyway, guys, I'm going to get out of here. The next time here on Botched Roll, we're probably going to talk about how do you deal with problem players and a problem DM? Like, how do you approach that situation? Because it can be hard. It is hard. But it doesn't have to end things. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have. So anyway, guys, I've been Mike the Birdman saying, may all your rolls be with advantage, and may you always hit that critical. So I will catch you guys next time right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.